knitters! I'm Sonika and this video is a walkthrough of my Silver Falls hat pattern. If you would like to purchase the pattern and follow along, I have it in my Ravelry store and my Etsy shop, and both of those are linked in the description. If you don't own the pattern, you might still find this video helpful. I have tips for reading your knitting and basic knitting techniques. The first step in the hat is a long tail cast on. I have a separate video for that, which I linked below. You could really use any cast on that's comfortable to you, but I really favor this cast on because it's stretchy and has a nice even edge. When the directions say place marker and join in the round without twisting, here's one way you can make sure that happens. Check to see that all of your stitches are on the same side of the needle on the inside here before you put on your stitch marker and start stitching. That way your hat won't be all twisted up. After the cast on, we start the 1x1 rib. One of my biggest tips for new knitters is to use stitch markers, as many as you need. If you are unsure about 1x1 rib, put a stitch marker every 10 stitches. Every time you get to the marker, you should have just finished a purl stitch and are ready to do a knit stitch. This will help, and if you do get off track, you know you only have to go back a few stitches to fix it. Notice I have a different marker there for the beginning of the row. It's a good time here to read your knitting. That is, looking at the stitches and the pattern you're making to see if you're on the right track. If you're doing the 1x1 rib correctly, you should begin to see these ribs forming in your knitting. The knit stitches are making columns of V's, and the purl stitches are receding and making columns of bumps. In the Silver Falls hat, you will be making a sweet row of hearts all around the body of your hat. Knitters who are new to knitting with multiple colors are often worried about switching colors, but don't be worried. It is literally letting go of the color you are using and picking up the next color. It is deceptively easy. And those stitch markers we put in every 10 stitches, leave those here because they will come in handy for our next step. Row 4, whether you're looking at the chart or the written directions, says knit your main color 4, contrast color 1, main color 4, and contrast color 1, and repeat around. So for every 10 stitches, you will do this once and repeat until you've gone all the way around the hat. Hey, your stitch markers will be a big help here. As you work up your way up the pattern, this is a good time to practice reading your knitting. Learning how to tell what stitches you have done in previous rows is, in my opinion, the most helpful thing you can do for your knitting. So here, the row you just knit is on the needles. So if I look, I can see that I knit 2 of the main color, 5 of the contrast color, and 3 of the main color. And I can check that against my chart or written directions and see that I've finished row 6. And I'm currently ready to start knitting row 7. You never know when you'll have to put down your knitting, so it's great to be able to read your knitting and know where you left off. Once you're done with the heart pattern, you're going to measure your hat from the cast on and see how much further you have to go before you start decreasing. There may be a difference in how tall your rows are compared to mine, so it's better to give a measurement for the hat height than the number of rows. The decreases on this hat make for a slightly gathered crown that I think looks great with a pompon. You can keep your stitch markers in place for now if you want, as there are 2 decreases for every stitch marker you have placed. You knit 3, knit 2 together, knit 3, knit 2 together, and then you'll come to a stitch marker. When your hat doesn't fit on the circular needle anymore, you can switch to double point needles or DPNs to be able to work on a smaller circumference. I think using DPNs are what wrestling an octopus must feel like. Switching from a circular needle to DPN seems tricky, but it helps if you don't think about it too much. Pick up your first DPN and just pretend that it's still your circular needle and knit as usual. You need at least 3 DPNs on your work, so I put 2 to 3 repeats of my decreases on each needle. I like to leave the marker on the needle wherever possible, but if you split up your work by repeat, then you know when you get to the end of a needle, you need to decrease, just like there was a marker there as before. When you have all of your decreases done, cut your yarn, leaving about a 12-inch tail. Thread the yarn through the stitches in the same direction as you have been knitting. If you go the other way, your stitches will unravel. Pull tight and then weave in your ends. For the top, I like to go through a few of the final stitches again, then weave a V-shape of 6 to 8 stitches on the inside. For the brim, you see how there is a stitch that looks like a little knot? This is the slip knot from your cast on, and I like to weave right through that knot first to close up the gap you see there. Then I weave up and back on one of the ribs of your ribbing. Just on the inside, you're going through each stitch all the way up and then go through each stitch again all the way back down. Trim off your excess yarn, and then the only thing left to do is block your hat. If you haven't blocked your knits before, do it. You will be surprised at how much better your stitches look after a good blocking. Check out my How to Block a Hat video for thorough instructions. Thank you so much, knitters, for joining me. I hope you've picked up some tips and tricks to make your knitting easier, less frustrating, and more enjoyable. You can see other Silver Falls hats people have knit on Instagram by checking out the hashtag Silver Falls Hat or hashtag Sonica Knits. Happy knitting!